Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, and everything else in between, that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and leverage insights from literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the rescuing of Western civilization at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 85, with our regular, now regular, I guess, now no longer semi-regular, you're now the regular co-host, Tom Libby. How you doing, Tom?
Fantastic as always, Hassan. Thanks for asking.
He's my Ed McMahon. We're just talking about this, except with less ego issues, or maybe Hank,
less hair too,
and less hair, or maybe Hank on the Larry Sanders Show, which, by the way, is a great show. You should watch it. Also, again, with fewer ego issues. So today we are going to read selections from the Norton Reader 4th edition Shorter. And I'm going to kind of go over the conceit of the Norton Reader here in just a second. But this is copyright 1977. And so we're going to read some of the selections from the Norton Reader. There's 3 essays that we are going to cover today. George Orwell's Politics and the English Language, Literature of Knowledge and Literature of Power by Thomas de Quincey, and Keys to Dreamland by Northrop Frye. And we're going to kind of draw a through line between those 3 essays around the impact of language, the impact of literature, and the impact of knowledge and power, and how that can help leaders become better leaders. And so we're going to start off with, of course, Politics in the English Language by George Orwell, and open with an assertion that Orwell makes here. And I quote, "Most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way, but it is generally assumed that we cannot by conscious action do anything about it. Our civilization is decadent, and our language, so the argument runs, must inevitably share in the general collapse." Now we're gonna do this a little bit differently than we normally do this. I'm gonna read some stuff, then I'm gonna pause and talk, and Tom's gonna jump in and talk, and it's gonna be great. You're gonna have to follow along a little bit. So just that one sentence right there. Our civilization is decadent, and our language, so the argument runs, must inevitably share in the general collapse. This was written, Politics in the English Language was written in, let's see, let me go to the big page here with all of the copyright information. And I know some of you who are listening know when this was written, because this is a very famous essay from Orwell. Was written in like 1945, right? So he's writing this in the 1940s. I think Orwell would probably have a problem with our language now.
I think anybody from the 1940s would have a problem with our language today.
Well, I think he would be shocked that we weren't further down the spiral.
Maybe not, because, like, we both have kids in their 20s, right? So
oh yeah,
I'm always arguing or complaining with my kids. Like, I said to one of my sons, I was like, why do you guys keep trying to shorten words? Like, just say the word. How lazy can you be? The word is just suspect. Why do you have to say sus? Like, I don't even understand. Like, what advantage do you have by abbreviating the word, right? And then his response to me was, well, you guys just made up words. Like,
that's no response. Get that out of town.
I was like, you guys, like, but at least our words ended up in the, when I was a kid, you can't say ain't. Ain't isn't a word. Well, it is now because it's in Webster's, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they made it into the lexicon.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but I think it's pretty funny that I agree with you. He would have thought. I don't know about the spiral part. I think he'd be shocked either way. Is the
Well, the
point.
entire internet would shock him and dismay him just in general.
Yeah.
And then after that, social media would just be the cherry on top of the ice cream cake there. All right, back to politics in the English language. So picking up, he says it follows that any struggle against the abuse of language is a sentimental archaism, like preferring candles to electrical light or hansom cabs to aeroplanes. So stop your struggle, Tom. Underneath this lies the half-conscious belief that language is a natural growth and not an instrument which we shape for our own purposes. I agree with that, by the way. Language is an instrument we shape for our own purposes and for our own time. Now, it is clear that the decline of language must ultimately have political and economic causes. It is not simply due to the bad influence of this or that individual writer, but an effect can become a cause, reinforcing the original cause and producing the same effect in an intensified form, and so on indefinitely. A man may take to drink because he feels himself to be a failure, and then fail all the more completely because he drinks. It is rather the same thing that is happening to the English language. It becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish, but the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. My grandma would have agreed with him, by the way. That's number one.
Sure.
Number two, my grandma would have used the word slovenly.
Yeah.
So that endears me already to Orwell, outside of the whole 1984 and Animal Farm thing. But then number three, I like it how he sets up right at the beginning of this essay the idea that an effect can become a cause, reinforcing the original cause and producing the same effect in an intensified form. Basically a spiral, basically a cul-de-sac that you can't get out of. And he's about to point this out with certain pieces of prose that he's going to select that are twisted beyond all recognition. But he's also going to talk about 5 different areas where you can see this. One of the things that we have never talked about on this podcast is the use of jargon, particularly in business. And I remember a few years ago, there was a consultant that wrote a book called No BS or something, I think. And he might have had a consulting agency that was, bull, and and basically his point was, I remember hearing him interviewed on another podcast or show, might have been Mitch Joel's show, 6 Pixels of Separation. But he was talking about how, and this is where I got the idea from him. He was talking about how business people, particularly business leaders, use jargon to hide in a political way, and that jargon actually warps culture, which I thought was a great point.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting dynamic that or not, there's some sort of paradigm shift that happened while I was asleep. And because quite frankly, I can't remember when it was. I know it was a while ago. It was probably 10 years ago or more. But there's that theory behind like meet them where they are kind of thing, right? Where leaders in today's workforce will find themselves bringing their own vernacular down to the level of the people they're talking to rather than trying to pick them up, right? Because 50 years ago, if you were at the low entry level, you're working for a Fortune 500 company, you're entry level, your entire career is trying to better yourself to push yourself up that ladder, right? Like you want to be I'm a entry level sales guy. I want to be a sales manager. I want to be a VP of sales. So you have to start talking the talk, walking the walk. And my grandmother, as you just said with the Slevin, my grandmother used to have a saying that I took to heart when I was a kid, which was, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want. Yep. That same vernacular today doesn't apply, because the higher you go up the ladder, the less you worry about what you wear today, right? Like, so like you see CEOs of huge companies wearing t-shirts and gym shorts to work, where I would think I'd be wearing a suit when I was a kid as a CEO, right? Or as a upper level management person or whatever. And what I'm boiling down to my point here is, back then it was that upper level expected you to educate yourself to speak the way they spoke. And in today's world, we are taking the upper level and coming down to where our entry level people are talking and talking their talk. So all that street slang and all that stuff that I would have never thought to learn in the first place when I was a kid. Now I have to learn to talk to my entry level people. The script was flipped a while back.
Well,
into millennials' faults, but that's all right.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll blame it on the millennials.
We'll blame them. Yeah,
we'll blame them. But does that make it easier? Do you agree with Orwell that makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts?
Yes. Okay. But think of it coming from generational, right? Like because I was raised in, like I said, my grandmother dressed for the job you want, not the job you have, right? So now I'm expected, if I want to be that CEO, I'm gonna go to work wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts. Like I can't see myself doing that, right? So to your point, like that's how the ridiculousness of it happens, where I gotta try to find a happy medium where I can't show up to work in gym shorts and a t-shirt, but I also don't want to be in a suit because I don't want the upper level people thinking that I'm brown nosing or kissing rear end or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, but that becomes like that self-perpetuating thing that he's talking about, right?
Definitely.
So I, as the CEO, if I'm coming in gym shorts and a t-shirt, right, I'm setting the tone. Now the tone is set. Now I'm expecting people to be serious in their roles, but I'm in I'll just go here. I'm in jorts. I'm in jorts. I'm in jean shorts.
And Crocs of all things. What the hell?
And Crocs. I look like what's his name from what was that HBO show with the comedian who played the guy with the mullet? Oh, it'll come to me in a minute. Yeah. It'll come to me in a minute. We thought he was like and he was an ex-baseball player. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
But to your point, like the CEO now, back then, you're talking about a CEO back then trying to set the tone. The CEO now is saying, look what success looks like. When you're successful, you can dress like this.
Okay, but you're not going to get any serious, right? But you're not going to get any. But then you want me to think seriously about solving your problem,
right?
You want me to deliver like PhD level suit and tie thinking to your jorts and your whatever you've got going on the back of your head that's short in the back and long in the front, or long in the back, short in the front, or party in the back and serious in the front, or whatever the heck it is. Like where Orwell was a little bit correct in how language, not a little bit, he was a lot correct in how language and action create this self-perpetuating cycle, but then the demands and the expectations that are then placed upon people don't match that. And now leaders, and particularly in a remote environment where if you're working remotely, like, and we saw this during 2020 during the height of the lockdowns, like how many people were at home, and we haven't talked about this on the podcast ever at all, but we might as well talk about it right now. How many people at home were pantsless on sales calls?
For sure.
I'm wearing pants right now, just so everybody knows who's watching the video.
Same.
Okay, so but like I believe in pants. Like if I want to be taken seriously, I've got to show up to pants on a Zoom call.
Well, and I think so. I agree with you to a pretty heavy degree, but like for me, the mentality was I still felt like I had to get up and get dressed in the morning in order to start my day. I couldn't just come down in my pajama pants, or like, to me, I wasn't mentally ready for work unless I was ready for work. So I never lost the routine of getting up, get showered, get shaved, get ready, get dressed as I'm getting normally dressed, and then go down and go to work. But in fairness, like sales and marketing professionals have been working remote for 20 years. Like this was not new for us, right? Like this was new to the rest of the world, but it wasn't new for us. Like, so it was a little bit different. But I still go back to the essay. I still think he's right. Like, I think it gets us into these, like these tug of wars of expectation and normalcy, right? Like of what we expect and what we find is normal, because what we find is normal and what we expect are sometimes two very different things.
Well, he's about to address that. So back to the essay for just a moment. he says the point is that the process is reversible. So he thinks that all this is reversible. We can rescue this, right? Remember, he's writing in 1945. Again, if he were around now, I don't know that he would think the process is reversible.
I would
But
love George Orwell today. Like I would love to see him not in his 90s or hundreds or whatever. I'm not him as himself. I'm saying like
yeah,
just take him out of 1945 at the same age and I'd love to
yeah.
see him our age like right now. I
At
think that
like
would be
40, just
fascinating. Yeah.
walking around with all of
Yeah.
this.
Yes. It would be fascinating.
Modern English, especially written English, back to the essay, modern English, especially written English, is full of bad habits, which spread by imitation and which can be avoided if one is willing to take the necessary trouble. So if you're willing to put forth the effort and think a little bit, you can avoid some of these habits in your language. If one gets rid of these habits, one can think more clearly, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of. And to think clearly is a necessary first step towards political regeneration. I did not highlight that, but I'm going to highlight it now. I'm going to watch my process happen. Usually, folks, I go through, I highlight things, and I'm going to read. And somehow I missed that. And then usually I will read it again in my own mind, but now I will read it again out loud because this is a very, very important point. If one gets rid of these habits, one can think more clearly, and to think clearly is a necessary first step towards political regeneration. If we want political regeneration in our country, which almost everybody says they do, and we're not a political podcast, but we do wade sometimes into political waters because it's just the nature of the things that we cover. And of course, Orwell was a political writer. I already mentioned 1984 and Animal Farm, and he cut his eye teeth on reporting on communism and on fascism when those words actually meant something. Political speech was very important to him, and the freedom to speak politically, particularly in England in his time, was very, very important to him. I think it's even more critical now. I will come back to this presently, back to the essay. I will come back to this presently, and I hope that by the time the meaning of what I have said here will become clearer. Meanwhile, here are 5 specimens of English language as it is now habitually written. These 5 passages have not been picked out because they are especially bad. I could have quoted far worse if I had chosen, but because they illustrate various of the mental vices from which we now suffer. They are a little below the average, but are fairly representative samples. I number them so I can refer back to them when necessary. Now, if you go pick up this essay, you could read those 5. I'm going to skip them reading the samples because one of them is incredibly convoluted, but I will tell you the sources. So one is from an essay written by a professor named Harold Lasky. Another is written by a professor, Lancelot Hogben, in a magazine called Interglossa, which is kind of amazing. I love that last name, Hogben. And then there was an essay that he selected, a piece from on psychology and politics that was written in New York. Then he threw in, much to my surprise, the language of a communist pamphlet, which had the term petit bourgeois in it, which I love. That makes me giggle. And then a letter that was written to the New York Tribune from just some average writer. So those are his five samples. From each one of those samples, he then says, each of these passages has faults of its own, but quite apart from avoidable ugliness, again, I love the way this guy writes, 2 qualities are common to all of them. The first is staleness of imagery. The other is lack of precision. The writer either has a meaning and cannot express it, or he inadvertently says something else, or he is almost indifferent as to whether his words mean anything or not.
Interesting.
We now live in a world, speaking of bringing Orwell to 2023, I think he would be shocked at the drowning, at how much we have drowned in words, but words that don't mean anything.
Absolutely.
And I run a podcast. I mean, I make my living from talking. This is what I do. And I'm not the only one. I mean, Joe Rogan makes his living from talking. Jordan Peterson makes his living from talking. Who else? Anybody that you could name on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. most of what you see on social media platforms outside of the meme culture and the visuals and the videos is written. Almost all of Google's search operates through words. I mean, that was Google's great innovation, those two guys. Sergey and Larry's great innovation was taking the internet from a page-based search system to a word-based search system, which opens up just an infinity of options. Nobody else saw that, by the way. Not even Yahoo saw that back in the 90s, and they didn't even understand how Google was going to work. But that's genius. It is. And one day on the podcast, I'll explain exactly how Google makes its money in the keyword auction process, which most people don't understand how that works. But the keyword auction process is absolutely genius. And Google was the first ones to come up with it. They just applied it to words versus other things like cars or land or something like that.
They didn't invent it, but they perfected it.
Oh, they got it down to a science.
That's the whole, you know, automobile industry with Henry Ford, Ford, right? Like, he didn't invent automobiles, but he certainly invented how we make a lot of money with them. Like,
yes, he did.
So,
well, or Hollywood with cinema. Like the French created cinema, and they didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Like, oh, we got moving pictures. I don't know what you do with that. The Americans like, hold my beer. we got this. we are the BASF of countries. We don't make the stuff. We just make the stuff that you make better. That's what we do. Yeah. So I think Orwell would be shocked at the volume of words we produce. But I think he would be more appalled by the lack of meaning behind all those words.
I was thinking about the conversation we had before we started the podcast about my profession, right? Like, so right. I'm a sales and marketing consultant, and we were just talking about how much I hate the way that marketing does exactly what you're talking about. We say they put an awful lot of words on screen or on paper or whatever that don't say anything. And my claim to fame, I guess, is I'm the word hacker, right? Like, I'm the one that goes in, and by hacker, I'm not talking about like making it easier, better, faster, whatever. I'm talking about making it simple. I go and I hack, literally I cut words out of the phrases that people write, because to Orwell's point, just get to the point. Like, why are you putting all these words in here?
Well, and this is why I wanted to read Orwell's essay, because I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is Tom. Tom would love this. This is what Orwell and George Orwell and Tom Libby separated at birth, or something more.
For sure. I would have gotten along with him fabulously.
Well, he says, as soon as certain topics are raised, the concrete melts into the abstract, and no one seems to be able to think of turns of speech that are not hackneyed. Prose consists less and less of words chosen for the sake of their meaning, and more of phrases tacked together like the sections of a prefabricated henhouse. I list below, with notes and examples, various of the tricks by means of which the work of prose construction is habitually dodged. That's an excellent sentence. Then he goes into all of them. I'm going to read off some of them for you. Dying metaphors. A newly invented metaphor assists thought by evoking a visual image, while on the other hand, a metaphor which is technically dead, for example, iron resolution, has in effect reverted to being an ordinary word and can generally be used without loss of vividness. This is one area he says is overdone. By the way, he also points out that many of the metaphors, and he lists a whole bunch of them, like ring the changes on, take up the cudgels for, something I never heard of, toe the line, ride roughshod over, stand shoulder to shoulder with, play into the hands of, no axe to grind, grist to the mill, fishing in troubled waters, Achilles heel. Some of these we don't even use anymore. Swan song. Like, when's the last time you heard anybody talk about a swan song? Like, nobody uses that term anymore. Hotbed. But I'm sure we could fill up our own modern era with dying metaphors. And what he says is many of these are used without knowledge of their meaning. What is a rift, for instance? And incompatible metaphors are frequently mixed, a sure sign that the writer is not interested in what he is saying. David Chase on The Sopranos, I'm going to pause there. David Chase on The Sopranos took this idea of mixed metaphors and stuck it in the Italian gangsters' mouths. to make things mean what they didn't mean. And this is the province of people who want to be smart or used to be. And this is where like David Chase was using it in The Sopranos and his writing of The Sopranos. It used to be that people mixing metaphors to sound smarter was the province of people who weren't that smart. But these guys were that smart. And so like Tony Soprano was an intelligent guy, but he just mixed metaphors all the time. And a mixed metaphor, there's a term for it. It's called malapropisms. And I freaking love that term because it's literally malappropriating a metaphor and twisting it to get it to do something that you wouldn't want it to do. Polly Walnuts was notorious for this.
Well, I was thinking more of the lines of like, so mixed metaphors, like the one of the smart ways to use them is like in code, right? Like
Sure.
when you're with your friends and you're a kid and you don't want your parents to know what you're talking about, sometimes
Right.
you throw around a couple of mixed metaphors and the parents are like, what the hell is wrong with these kids? But you know exactly what you guys are talking about. That is a second level intelligence that we don't give
That
credit
is.
enough to younger people for.
That
Right. And
is.
again, I talk about my kids often, and we've talked about our kids often
Mm-hmm.
together, but they do the same thing. Like they'll talk about something, that they read and about Ukraine or about Israel or whatever the world politics are going on. But if they don't want me to know what their side of the story, like what side they land on,
Mm-hmm.
they'll throw in these mixed metaphors, and I'll be like, you guys aren't even making any sense. And they're like, yeah, we are to us. And I'm like, yeah, speak
Yeah.
English. Like, can you
Speak English.
just speak English? Stop it.
Then the other one he gives, so that's dying metaphors. The other one he gives is operators or verbal false limbs. I love that. He says these save the trouble of picking out appropriate verbs and nouns, and at the same time pad each sentence with extra syllables, which give it an appearance of symmetry. By the way, this is what Tom hates. Characteristic phrases are render inoperative, militate against, make contact with, be subjected to, give rise to, give grounds for, have the effect of, play a leading part, role in, make itself felt, take effect, exhibit a tendency to, serve the purpose of. The keynote is the elimination of simple verbs. Instead of being a single word, such as break, stop, spoil, mend, kill, a verb becomes a phrase made up of a noun or adjective tacked onto some general purpose verb, such as prove, serve, form, play, render. In addition, the passive voice is wherever possible used in preference to the active, and noun constructions are used instead of gerunds. By the way, no one remembers gerunds. The range of verbs is further cut down by means of the is and D formation, and the banal statements are given an appearance of profundity by means of the not un formation. We're not doing a whole English lesson here, folks, but it is important to realize that when you're looking at bad writing, so when someone says, for instance, I'll use this in a sentence, we are going to make contact with the Ukrainians today. You're going to call them. Just say we're going to make a phone call. Now, by the way, Donald Trump is amazing at this. This was when he was talking about the phone call that he had to the Ukrainians or something. And he says, that was the cleanest phone call ever in the history of phone calls. That's what Orwell is talking about. It's that kind of padding of the sentence when you don't need to pad it,
Right.
Again, a sign of foolish thinking. Back to the essay. So pretentious diction, words like phenomenon, element, individual as a noun, objective, categorical, effective, virtual, basic, that's a big one. Primary, promote, constituent, constitute, exhibit, exploit, utilize. That's another one. I eliminate, utilize everywhere I see it. Eliminate, liquidate are used to dress up simple statements and give an air of scientific impartiality to biased judgments. You see that all over the place. We're going to utilize XYZ, or we're going to objectify, or we're going to I love this one. We're categorically we're categorically this, or we're categorically that. No, you're not. And he makes a point a little bit further down. Bad writers, and especially scientific, political, and sociological writers, are nearly always haunted by the notion that Latin or Greek words are grander than Saxon ones.
Oh, for sure. I can't say I hate it. I don't hate it because there are cases where you should use them. Like, for example, and like especially if they're in common theme or common language, like quid pro quo, right? Like
Sure.
if you know what quid pro quo means, it makes sense to use it. But
Right.
there are other circumstances where you're just trying to outsmart the other person. I mean, stop it. Like it's
It almost approaches being a malapropism where you're
yes.
mixing a metaphor almost. Like when I hear quid pro quo, I think of squid pro row. Like that's what I think of. And that's a ridiculous malapropism from Futurama, but it's mocking this
Yeah.
idea that that you can
Well,
use this.
and in today's, especially in the corporate world, quid pro quo has become something of like a negativity, right? Because they're thinking
Sure.
it's some sort of like some sort of uh, leadership role or superior, person trying to get somebody to do something that's illegal, not illegal, but like out of whack or whatever, and it's sexual in nature sometimes, and like all this stuff.
Yeah.
When the reality of it is, it just means this for that. It's just a way of doing
Right.
business. I'm going to do this for you, you do this for me, and it's a
Right.
quid pro quo. It's like it doesn't have to be negative, but we have turned it into this connotation that just every time you say, "Oh, like their relationship is their quid pro quo," and you're like, "No, they just like each
No,
other." Like I don't
just
understand.
like each other. Just say handshake and move on.
And move
Uh,
on. Exactly.
okay, here's back to the essay. Meaningless words. In certain kinds of writing, particularly in art criticism and literary criticism, which by the way, I studied art criticism in school. I ran across this a lot, this next criticism that he's going to give, and he's correct. In certain kinds of writing, particularly in art criticism and literary criticism, it is normal to come across long passages which are almost completely lacking in meaning. That is true. Words like romantic, plastic values, human, dead, sentimental, natural, vitality are used in art criticism are strictly meaningless in the sense that they not only do not point to any discoverable object, but are hardly ever expected to do so by the reader. When one critic writes, quote, the outstanding feature of Mr. X's work is its living quality, unquote, while another writes, quote, the immediately striking thing about Mr. X's work is its peculiar deadness, unquote, the reader accepts this as a simple difference of opinion. If words like black and white were involved instead of the jargon words dead and living, he would see at once that language is being used in an improper way. Many political words are similarly abused. And this is a knock for our time. Here we go. And I double underline this. The word fascism has now no meaning except insofar as it signifies something not desirable. I'm now going to get on my hobby horse. He wouldn't like that metaphor either. But I'm going to ride it around the corral a little bit of my show and say this. Almost nobody knows what the textbook definition of the word fascism is. Almost nobody knows what the textbook word is because it has come to mean precisely what Orwell predicted in 1945. It has come to mean anything that is outside of what I like and what works for me in my political schema of reality. And by the way, since now, and by the way, Orwell's writing this before feminism, Western feminism really kicked off, second wave feminism really kicked off in the late 50s and early 60s, and then into the 70s. In the 60s, feminist thought and feminist theory postulated that the personal was political. Okay, fine. Well, if the personal is political and I personally don't like fascism, then everything that I don't like is politically fascist. That's ridiculous. And that's where we're at now. And Orwell was dead bang on. Yeah, that's right. I rode my hobby horse around the corral. Tom doesn't have to say anything. You see him on the video. He's making the face. He doesn't want to say anything because he doesn't want to get in trouble. I will get in trouble. It's my show. Look, if you don't know what the word means, stop using it. For sure. Stop using it. Just like the word, by the way, I'll go on the other side. Communist. People don't know what the word communist means. They have no clue. And the other hobby horse word is socialist. You don't know what that word means either.
Well, and I think they get butchered an awful lot by. I'm not gonna throw the young people under the bus here, but I am because I think they get misused by. I think they get misused a lot by the younger generation, and I'm not talking about kids. I'm talking about the 20s, right? Like 20 somethings that that think that this or that, like socialism or communism is evil and socialism is wonderful. Like if you understood the definition of the two of them completely, then you might not be thinking that. And I'm not, again, we don't need to get political here, but
No.
but to your point, the reality of it is you don't really know what that means. Like you don't
Right.
really know what, because if you did, I tell people communism at its purest form in a small scale is probably not the worst thing in the world.
No, it works just fine for a tribe or a family. Past that,
Exactly.
it doesn't work.
Right. Past that, it doesn't work. And we've had multitude of people try to make it work on a global scale or a countrywide scale. And
Mhm.
it's proven time and time again that it doesn't. But the younger people just think communist equals evil. And that's not the
It's not
case. Like,
the case.
it's
No.
really not.
No.
It's just,
Well, it goes back to what Orwell was talking about in his setup to the beginning of this, which is if you don't understand that language is a natural growth and not an instrument which we shape for our own purposes. If you think that language is something that happens naturally versus something you have control over, you're just going to use words. And you're not going to actually think about the precision of language necessary. And I'll go a step further. I will say this for leaders. Here's the tip coming out of this, because leaders are listening to this going, why are we talking about this? Well, here's the tip. The more precise you are in your language, the more you get to win, if that's really what you're looking for. And I'm not just talking about winning in negotiation. I'm talking about winning in leading your people, winning in establishing a vision, winning in role modeling, and all these kinds of ways that we want leaders to win, whether you're in jorts or not. If you have precise language, you win.
well, and on top of that, and something that I've said on this podcast before, and I don't remember what episode, but it was quite a while back. But there's something to be said about not reacting right away, not
Right.
like Orwell talks about something like if you're just so willing to jump in as soon as somebody said. I've said on this podcast before. When I went through my very first management training course. The very first management training course, they said something to me that I never understood until much later in life, which was, don't just do something, stand there. And it completely contradicts what you're told as a kid, right? Like when you're told,
Right.
don't just stand there, do something. Like you got to react. No. From a management and a leadership level, don't just do something, stand there. And what that allows you to do is take everything in, formulate your thoughts, make sure, to your point, your words are crystal clear coming back. So when you're getting feedback from people or you're listening to people give you, counter ideas or whatever the case may be, just stop. Just
Mm-hmm.
sit there and take it all in, listen. And to your point, here you go, leaders. Like, don't just do something, stand there. Stop reacting to things immediately and start listening and formulating and getting very concise on how you're going to respond to those things.
Well, and Orwell gives practical advice for how to write, even in this. And so he says a little bit later on in the essay, which we'll pick up here, people who write in this manner usually have a general emotional meaning, but they dislike one thing and want to express solidarity with another, which is fine. But they are not interested in the detail of what they are saying. So he's critiquing people in this section. He's critiquing people utilizing words in ways to create images that they don't understand, basically. He says, and then he writes in opposition to this, a scrupulous writer in every sentence that he writes will ask himself at least 4 questions. Thus, what am I trying to say? This is, by the way, this goes out to Tom Libby. This is the Tom Libby editing suite right here of questions, 4 of them. What am I trying to say? What words will express it? What image or idiom will make it clearer? Is this image fresh enough to have an effect? And he will probably ask himself 2 more. Could I put it more shortly? Have I said anything that is avoidably ugly?
Love it. I got nothing else to say. I just think that everybody should cut and paste that and put it right on their computer desk on a sticky note, right on their screen. So every time they try to write, just look at it.
Well, and I would even assert one more, make it 6. I'll assert one more. Does this thing need to be written by me?
Even better, yeah.
Because I said this with another guest back in episode 51 when we were talking about politeness in his own Toby's The Way of the Samurai, and we were discussing with my guest on that show, on that episode, the nature of polite communication and how we have had a decline in politeness in our culture overall. And we mistake rudeness for transparency and truth, when in reality, rudeness is just rudeness, right? And we've negated that because we are looking for people to express their authentic selves. Well, Natobi would say being authentic includes being polite, because rudeness is it's a cudgel rather than a sword. It does something different, right? I think Orwell would agree with that, by the way. But the idea of, does this have to be said by me, even before we go into those other things, those other elements of writing, which, by the way, I would agree, does this have clear idiom? What am I trying to say? What words will express it? You know, that putting a break on the hot take culture of self that we are currently in our communication culture in the West because of social media, which values the hot take over the slow burn, or the measured response, is critical, I think, for writing success as a leader, and quite frankly for everybody. I mean, I think of how many times I've seen stuff on the internet, not on the internet, on social media, and I'm a huge Twitter guy. I've said this before. Now X, I'm a huge Twitter guy. Love Twitter, right? Or at least loved Twitter. It was one of those things I had to wean myself away from. And Twitter exists algorithmically to get you to respond, to react like that. And once I realized that, I had to train myself out of the quick clap back that gets a lot of likes and move more into a measured response. And it's interesting, when you give more measured responses, the algorithm hates you because it doesn't generate as much heat as the hot take does. And particularly a well-written algorithmic response with a lot of words in it, everybody runs away from that. You want the key to driving people away from your Facebook page and reducing drama? Just write really well-written responses to things. No one's looking for that.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. One other point from Politics in the English Language, and then we'll move on to Thomas de Quincey. A speaker who uses that kind of phraseology has gone some distance towards turning himself into a machine. So here he is talking about how it's broadly true, and he mentions this at the beginning, that political writing is bad writing. He says orthodoxy of whatever color seems to demand a lifeless, imitative style. The political dialects to be found in pamphlets, leading articles, manifestos, white papers, and the speeches of undersecretaries do, of course, vary from party to party, but they are all alike in that one almost never finds in them a fresh, vivid, homemade turn of speech. When one watches some tired hack on the platform mechanically repeating the familiar phrases, bestial atrocities, iron heel, bloodstained tyranny, free peoples of the world, that one's coming back, stand shoulder to shoulder, that one's coming back, one often has a curious feeling that one is not watching a live human being, but some kind of dummy, a feeling which suddenly becomes stronger at moments when the light, this was great, when the light catches the speaker's spectacles and turns them into blank discs, which seem to have no eyes behind them. And this is not altogether fanciful. A speaker who uses that kind of phraseology has gone some distance towards turning himself into a machine. The appropriate noises are coming out of his larynx, but his brain is not involved as it would be if he were choosing his words for himself. If the speech he is making is one that he is accustomed to make over and over again, he may be almost unconscious of what he is saying, as one is when one utters the responses in a church. And this reduced state of consciousness, if not indispensable, is at any rate favorable to political conformity. It's also favorable to organizational conformity. I think of how many times Tim Cook's spectacles have turned into mirror glasses when he speaks at the New York Stock Exchange or at an Apple event. I don't think it's an accident that Steve Jobs, his eyes, you could always see them at the Apple events. Tim Cook's, you can't see him. The light catches him just right.
Yeah, half of that, the reading of that last part, I was actually thinking more the lines of, like, have you ever noticed, like, somebody who uses ChatGPT to write a blog, there's an awful lot of words that say nothing. And you're supposed to be a thought leader. You're trying to represent yourself as a thought leader in your industry. You use ChatGPT to write a blog. That's what it reminded me of. That last part that you were reading.
Well, and if you look at their videos on TikTok, you probably can't really see their eyes either. Oh, right. No, that's terrible. I'm sure you can. I'm sure it's fine. They're thought leaders.
Yeah.
Their thoughts a little shaky. In our time, back to the essay, and I'll close here on this one. In our time, political speech and writing are largely the defense of the indefensible, such as in 1945, as is now. Things like the continuation of British rule in India, the Russian purges and deportations, the dropping of the atom bombs on Japan, can indeed be defended, but only by arguments which are too brutal for most people to face, and which do not square with the professed aims of political parties. Thus, political language has to consist largely of euphemism, question begging, and sheer cloudy vagueness. George Orwell for the win.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you ever listen to a political ad, again, they say an awful lot of words without saying much of anything. I mean, I had to go look online. There was one, I'm not going to say who it is, it's irrelevant, but there was a political ad I saw, and I had to go look up this person's platform because the ad didn't tell me what they stood for. Like, the ad didn't tell me anything. I had no idea what this person was saying that they were like. So I started reading on their political page and what they stood for and where they stand on certain issues. And I was like, oh yeah, I couldn't vote for this person. Like,
don't worry.
Looking at the ad, I was like, oh, they seem pretty cool. Like
well, just wait till all of their political positions are written by ChatGPT 5. You're going to love that. It's going to be great.
No, I'm not.
Nobody's going to love that. Nobody's going to love it at all. It's going to be terrible. And Orwell hits on something that I think is human. It's the human tendency, and I don't think it's just in the English language. I think we could apply this anywhere. Like if you wrote politics and the Russian language, or politics and the Hindu language, or politics and the Spanish language, I think you would probably, with some minor differences based on culture, because language also drives culture, with minor differences in that, I think you'd run across the same thing. I think there's the human tendency to hide inside of language, the human tendency to look for, and we're gonna read from Thomas de Quincey here in a minute, but the human tendency to look for power inside of words is almost, not almost, it is a universal. You get more power out of words than you do out of images. One other thought. So Orwell's writing in 1945 or so, right around there, right around the end of World War II. I think that's about the time that Politics in the English Language was published, or at least that's when it's copyrighted. And one of the points that he makes is that in our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues. Remember, I said the personal is political. And politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia.
I mean, that's pretty much the definition, right?
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the definite. That just described every politician you've ever met in your life.
So here's the challenge question then. Should leaders in small and medium-sized business entities, I'm not talking about the places where you get paid $50,000 a month and you're like running a small country, the IBMs and the AT&Ts of the world, forget those folks. One of the challenges in small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in like the $500,000 to $50 million range, the challenge in those kinds of business organizations is, for leaders in particular, is how political to be, particularly now, right? And if those leaders are uninterested or don't have the stomach, right, to engage in a process with language that fundamentally is going to be about lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia, if they don't want to engage in that, what's their get out of jail free card in 2023 when we're way down the road of politics being everywhere. We're way down that road, more so than we were in 1945. Because I think that's a real leadership challenge. If I don't want to be political, if I want to speak truth for my local community or for my region or for my state, and I'm not going to be publicly traded, I don't have ambitions of being IBM or AT&T or Apple or any of these big companies that we talk about, they always write the case studies about in Harvard Business Review. If I don't have any interest in any of that, yet I live in an environment where one wrong interaction on social media destroys everything, or can, or has the capacity to do so, how do I engage with language? How do I engage with thought?
That's an interesting question, actually. I don't think there's a simple answer for that, Hassan, honestly.
I don't think there is either.
I think that question, because one of the things, we grew up listening to our parents say, there are three things you never talk about, with friends, family, or at work or whatever, right? It's sex, religion, politics. Like, you don't talk about that stuff. And in today's day and age, there's no way you're going to avoid talking about one, if not all of those three things, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's something to be said about a leader who sticks to factual information and simplicity in response versus somebody that gets kind of dragged through the mud or dragged into the weeds of a fight, right? So, and I think there are ways, like, I think that's another podcast, honestly, because I think that could be a podcast all by itself, right? Where we're talking about actual tactics and strategies behind not allowing yourself to get dragged into these types of things. Because I also think there's, some compartmentalization that needs to happen, and people need to learn about how to, like, go to a city hall meeting and voice their opinion, but not allow that opinion to run their company. Mm-hmm. If it's, again, we're here in the US, right? We have Democrat, Republican, independent voters. If you have 100 people in your company and 30 of them are Democrats, 30 of them are Republican, and 40 of them are independent, and you go off and say something about X topic on a city hall, like, council meeting or something like that, you're going to upset at least half the apple cart, right?
Oh, like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something you say is going to be upsetting to one of those. But if you go back to work and you're saying, listen, the facts of the matter are this is how it impacts our company. I think there's ways to do that, but I don't think it's as simple as I'm going to write a statement and call it a day, right? I don't think that's
well, and we ran into this with the social unrest during the year 2020, during the summer, right? During the lockdowns. And every organization that had zero business writing a political statement about where they were coming down on racial relations in America put that everywhere they could. And it wasn't just the big boys, right? It was all the way down the line.
And talk about a subject, by the way, that people said an awful lot of words that meant nothing.
Correct. I mean, oh my gosh.
I was mortified by half those statements that came out. I couldn't even understand it.
It was insane. And at a certain point, even I have to say, I have to paraphrase a very important insight that Michael Jordan once had. And I think you know what I'm about to say. Even Republicans buy sneakers.
Yeah.
The rioters are going to buy Nikes, and so are the cops. So is your job is your job if you're Nike? No, forget Nike. If your job is your job as a shoemaker in a local town who's distributing Nikes, is your job to put a statement on your website that says you support one or the other? Or is your job just to sell shoes to both the rioters and the cops?
Right. Exactly. Kind of what I was saying earlier, right? Just you can state fact, right?
Right.
That's the way that I would answer those questions. So stop writing about all the fluff and stop writing about something that you may or may not have. If I'm writing that statement, I have not lived through what that community lived through. So why am I writing a statement on how I'm gonna address?
Right.
Like, it shouldn't be that. Like, it should just be simply.
Well,
This
at a
is how
certain
my.
point, it's okay to not. Again, because we live in the world of the hot take, right? The
Yeah.
impolite hot take, where we are now, and this is we talked about this a little bit on a shorts episode. We recorded recently. I think it was number 104. I think go back and listen to it. But it's this idea, and I'm concerned about this, where we've now had almost 50, no more than that. We're now approaching 20 years of algorithmically driven behavior in our communication and social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And we have now trained our brains collectively over the course of 20 years to go into hot take mode. And that doesn't work outside of a social media echo chamber.
Right.
But because we've trained our brain, my mama used to say back in the day, and the neuroscience does back this up, your brain only knows what you tell it. My brain doesn't know the difference between my communication and my relationship with my employees if I'm a leader, and my communication if I'm in a relationship with people on Reddit. It doesn't know the difference. It's just communicating. To Orwell's point about having precise language, I have to tell my brain. My brain isn't just operating on, or it shouldn't be anyway, operating on autopilot. And so if I've been training myself algorithmically over the course of time, and now I have to, there's a term that Black people use called code switch, but it works here too. If I have to task switch or code switch into another spot, that's going to be a real challenge for me. And I'm going to have to think about that. And it's just going to be easier for me to take my Reddit-based behavior and put it on the front of my business. And by the way, those 100 people who work for me, those 30 Democrats, those 30 Republicans, and let's just make it easy, those 30 independents. And then, of course, the 10 people who are just like, I don't have an opinion. I just want to this is just something I do in between my hobbies. Why are you bothering me? Because those people are around. Trust me.
True. That's true. Yeah.
And there's actually more than 10 of them, but let's just keep the ratios right.
It's probably 20 and 40 of them.
It is actually. As a leader of a company, as a leader of an organization, is this something I should be struggling with? Because if you hang out in the online echo chambers, you're not a good human. You're not a moral human being unless you're struggling with this. Well, I want to be a moral human being. I don't want to be immoral, so I need to struggle with this. But your job is to sell shoes, or glasses, or headphones, or T-shirts, or deliver services to people.
I think the other, like I said, my second part of that, which is compartmentalization, right? So to your point, you are not your company, right? So your company's job is to sell shoes. You as a human being, as an individual, go right ahead and struggle with it. That's perfectly okay, as long as that struggle does not leak over into your business, because that's really the business shouldn't struggle with it. To your point, the business is selling shoes. Sell shoes to whoever the hell wants to buy them. But as a human being, I can detach myself from the company and still struggle with the moral compass of it, of how I'm supposed to react or what I'm supposed to do here.
Well, and that sort of, and again, this is a whole podcast episode just by itself, so I want to reel this in a little bit. And by the way, this is something we can discuss next year on the podcast, because next year is 2024, big election year. Election year in America. Big election year in America. It's gonna be great.
I'm already dreading it. Are you kidding me?
It's gonna be great for the podcast, Tom.
Oh, all right,
high ratings. High ratings. A lot of downloads. Fiery hot takes. Don't you know? We're in it for the hot takes.
Hot takes. That's
hot
right.
takes. I think the challenge for people is, and Orwell was writing during a time when the full comprehension of what the Germans did to the Jews in World War II hadn't quite all landed yet. Like, it was starting. I mean, Nuremberg was starting to happen. The judgments at Nuremberg were starting to occur. Like, they were starting to get an idea, particularly in Europe, of exactly just how far the Third Reich had pushed the argument of European pogroms that had been happening for a millennia in Europe, right? Um, and Orwell's writing at the beginning of that understanding. He didn't live, obviously, to see the end of communism, but even during his time, there were rumors that Stalin was putting together the Gulag Archipelago, things Alexander Solzhenitsyn was writing about that we've read on this podcast, and Václav Havel a lot later. And that this idea of an Iron Curtain coming down across Europe, that was about 10 years out. But the rumors were starting to come out that maybe Walter Lippmann, who was writing for the I believe the New York Times back in the day, might have gilded the lily a little bit when he went to Russia, right? It might not have been exactly what it is that Stalin was portraying it to be. And of course, Orwell didn't survive to see China's turn and the Great Famine and the Cultural Revolution and all of that, which he would have been shocked by all of that. He was right at the beginning of all that. And so I think for us who live in the backwash of all that culture and all that history, the idea that we always have to be on guard, we always have to be vigilant against, now I'm going to use the word, we always have to be vigilant against fascism that's arising in either our language, right? But it's become so the vigilance has become so meaningless, I think, particularly when the political all becomes personal. I think we've bled over realms. And to your point, you use the term compartmentalization. I would use the word boundaries. We've allowed boundaries to dissolve, and now everything's sort of mushed to the middle, and that's not a good move for leaders.
Well, I think, like, to your point, I think I think those two things are not mutually exclusive. I think that the compartmentalization of leaders is starting to fade because the boundaries of the people that we're leading are fading, right? Like it's like they're not mutually exclusive. They're action reaction type things. Like we're trying to not compartmentalize as much because our subordinates or the people that we're supposedly leading are starting to blur those lines. So now we feel like we have to blur those lines with them in order to be an effective leader. And that I don't believe that. I don't buy into that. I think that the more they blur the lines, the more we should be putting up the compartmentalization part of it. I actually think the opposite effect should be happening, and it doesn't always.
It doesn't always. Yeah. No, that's a tough one, and that's why Orwell kind of triggered that over in my head as I've been thinking about it as we've been reading it. All right. We're going to turn the corner here. We're going to talk about literature of knowledge and literature of power. This is Thomas de Quincey. Interesting fact about Thomas de Quincey. Thomas Penson de Quincey, who was born in August of 1785 and died in December of 1859. So he had a good long life. Was an English writer. This is according to his, speaking of words, according to his Wikipedia article. Which Orwell would love his own Wikipedia article, was an English writer, an essayist, and a literary critic. De Quincey was best known for his, love this title, folks, Confessions of an English Opium Eater, written in 1821. Many scholars suggest that in publishing this work, De Quincey inaugurated the tradition of addiction literature in the West. By the way, in case you don't know what addiction literature is, think of the movies Trainspotting and Requiem for a Dream, or any drug movie or drug film that you've ever seen in or heard of in your life. This guy was the grandfather, apparently, of all of that. So
would the movie Limitless fall into that category?
I would think so.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
I mean,
kind of like that movie. That's why.
Well, but right. I mean, it does offer a panacea. I will grant you that. All right. So reading from De Quincey's essay here, Literature of Knowledge, Literature of Power, and Literature of Power. And by the way, the sentences here are a little bit what Orwell was railing against, just as a warning. In that great social organ, which collectively we call literature, there may be distinguished two separate offices that may blend and often do so, but capable severally of a severe insulation and naturally fitted for reciprocal repulsion. What that means is that there's two aspects inside of literature that are bound together but should actually be separated, should actually repulse each other. Back to the essay. There is, first, the literature of knowledge, and secondly, the literature of power. The function of the first, that would be knowledge, is to teach. The function of the second is to move. That's power. The first is a rudder, the second an oar or a sail. The first speaks to the mere discursive understanding. The second speaks ultimately, it may happen, to the higher understanding or reason, but always through affections of pleasure and sympathy. Remotely, it may travel towards an object seated in what Lord Bacon calls dry light. But proximately, it does and must operate, else it ceases to be a literature of power, and on through that humid light, which clothes itself in the mists and glittering iris of human passions, desires, and genial emotions. Men have so little reflected on the higher functions of literature as to find it a paradox if one should describe it as a mean or subordinate purpose of books to give information. Basically, what he's saying here is people haven't thought about literature being a source of power. Instead, they merely think about it as a source of information. And by the way, he's writing, in the early 19th century, where, again, before you have mass communication at scale, before radio, obviously before television, and forget the internet, right? And so this is a highly literate culture in comparison to ours, right? A highly literate culture that is looking for or seeking to merge two things together, and he's seeking to separate them. Whenever we talk in ordinary language of seeking information or gaining knowledge, we understand the words as connected with something of absolute novelty. But it is the grandeur of all truth, which can occupy a very high place in human interests, that it is never absolutely novel to the meanest of minds. It exists eternally by way of germ or latent principle in the lowest to the highest, needing to be developed, but never to be planted. To be capable of transplantation is the immediate criterion of a truth that ranges on a lower scale. In essence, if you have to move an idea from literature from a high space down to a lower space, it's probably not that valuable. Besides which, there is a rarer thing than truth, namely power. And this is how he defines power to Quincey, or a deep sympathy with the truth. What is the effect, for instance, upon society or children? By the pity, by the tenderness, and by the peculiar modes of admiration which connect themselves with the helplessness, with the innocence, and with the simplicity of children, not only are the primal affections strengthened and continually renewed, but the qualities which are dearest in the sight of heaven, the frailty, for instance, which appeals to forbearance, the innocence which symbolizes the heavenly, and the simplicity which is most alien to the worldly, are kept in perpetual remembrance, and their ideals are continually refreshed. A purpose of the same nature is answered by the high literature, vis-a-vis the literature of power. What did you learn from Paradise Lost? That's John Milton. Nothing at all. What do you learn from a cookery book? Something new, something that you did not know before in every paragraph. But here's the question. But would you therefore put the wretched cookery book on a higher level of estimation than the divine poem? Is a cookbook more valuable to you than Milton? And then his point. well, De Quincey's got something for you here. yes, the cookbook is more valuable than Milton. Okay, hold on a second before I hit you with his penultimate conclusion there. Why is the cookbook? Because we do live in a time. This is one of the questions I have on here for you. Or one of the questions that I wrote down. Why do we live in such a utilitarian time? Because we do. We live in a time of, or not utilitarian, a utility-oriented time. Because if it's not useful, then we're like, I don't have time for that. And as we've moved everything towards usefulness, I think De Quincey would argue we've moved away from beauty and power. We've actually reduced things. We've reduced Milton to a cookbook.
I mean, I don't know. I think part of it is like we get so wrapped up. Like, how do I word this? So like time is the only thing that you can spend and not earn, right? You can
Yes.
spend time, you can never get time back. Like you can't earn more time. You can't say that I'm gonna, live till I'm 75. Let's just say we have predictive analytics that say I'm gonna die at 75. I can't go, nah, I'm gonna wait till I'm 80. Like I'm gonna die when I'm 80. So I get 5 years back. I'm gonna go, it doesn't work that way, right? So like, so if I'm there for me, and everybody listening to this, when I answered that, I was talking about me, myself, and I, not in general, because I love to cook. I love to cook.
Mhm.
It's a passion of mine. And if I think we've talked about it once or twice on these podcasts.
Mhm.
I went to culinary school. I cook every Sunday for my entire family. There's 12, 15 people that come to my house for dinner every Sunday because I cook random stuff that they think that is unique and amazing and whatever, right? So for me,
Do you
the
cook, by the
cookbook,
way? Pause 1 second. Do you cook the last Thursday in November?
no, no,
Okay. All right.
that day that you're talking about for us, that's football day.
It's
So
football. Okay, football day. Okay, all
I
right,
cook all football foods on that day.
fine. I was just curious. After the
Anyway,
Wounded Knee episode, I was just curious. Go ahead, keep going. Don't let me stop
so
you.
the point for me is, and I think to what he's thinking about, it's really about reading what's going to move you forward as a person. I don't
Sure.
think it like so the utilitarian piece of this, for me, it seems
Utility,
like it,
the
it
utility
seems
piece.
like the cookbook is more utility, but for me it's not about utility. For me, it's more the love of cooking that leans me more toward the cookbook, right?
Okay, so if Milton wrote a cookbook, you'd be
I would
all over that. You'd
I
be
would
all
read
over
it,
it.
right?
Okay.
I would want to read it because I would want to see. Now, again, so my son and I, by the way, have this discussion all the time because for some strange reason, I can't bring myself to read fiction. I just don't like fake stuff. I don't like fantasy stuff. I don't thrive. I thrive more on factual information and that
Wait a minute.
utility of,
You and I have read Shakespeare
yes,
and Jane Austen.
yes. That doesn't mean I love
Okay.
it. The fact that I understand it and I can speak on it doesn't mean I love it.
Wow.
Bury my
Undercutting the
heart.
entire podcast here.
Bury my heart at Wounded Knee is one of my favorite books. It's one of
Right.
my
Yeah.
all-time favorite books. It's factual. It's data-driven. There's information in there. There's not a lot of story behind it. There's not a lot of fake stuff in there, right? Like it's
Mhm.
that. Those are the types of books that I will read in my spare time for leisure. For me to
Sure.
enjoy the book, it needs to be that, right? It needs to be something like that. I don't really get how I don't get lost in a book like people do. Like my son, he makes fun of me all the time. He's like, when he read, Game of Thrones and 1984 and The Great Gatsby, all the great books, right? He's like, but Dad, you can get lost in these books. And I go, I need a map. I don't get lost anywhere. I don't want to be lost. I don't want to be lost. I want to be able to find my way in and out. I want to be able to drive down the road and take a left-hand turn and I know where I'm going. I know what's at the end of the street, right?
Well, I think you should give Orwell a shot then. After politics in the English language, now we've covered this. I think you should give Orwell a shot. I think you should give 1984 Animal Farm. Start with Animal Farm. It's it's like 80 pages. It's thin.
And just again, for the reader's sake, don't get me wrong. It's not like I've read Steinbeck. I've read Arthur Miller. I've read all these books
Death
of
of a
Mice and
Salesman.
Men
That's
and
appropriate.
Death of a
That's
Salesman.
appropriate.
Exactly. I've read a lot of these books mostly because I've had to. It was required reading when you're in the advanced English classes that I was taking. So it's not that I didn't read them. What I'm getting at, and to go back to your essay here, when you ask the question, would you rather read the cookbook than I forget the author now.
Then Milton.
Milton, yes, thank you.
Paradise Lost. Yeah.
Paradise Lost, right. It's would you rather read it? And for me, I would rather read the cookbook because that's where I love that. I love reading it.
You know what we're doing next year? We're doing poetry next year because it's taken me 3 years to kind of work into poetry. I'm signing. Oh, you're co-hosting. You're co-hosting with me on poetry. Oh yeah. I'm changing the schedule right now. Tennyson. We're gonna read Tennyson.
Tennyson. Yeah. Oh God.
Well, back to the essay, because what De Quincey would say to you is this: what you owe to Milton is not any knowledge of which a million separate items are still, but a million advancing steps on the same earthly level. What you owe is power. That is exercise and expansion to your own latent capacity of sympathy with the infinite, where every pulse and each separate influx is a step upwards, a step ascending as upon a Jacob's ladder from earth to mysterious altitudes above the earth. All the steps of knowledge, from first to last, carry you further on the same plane, but can never raise you 1 foot above your ancient level of earth. Whereas the very first step in power is a flight, is an ascending movement into another element where earth is forgotten. By the way, that's a fancy way of saying you'll get lost in a book.
I know. That's what I'm saying. So what he doesn't understand about guys like me is that's not happening. When I read, I'll give you an example. When I read of Mice and Men, right?
Yes.
No,
okay.
No. A better one. 12 Angry Men. I read
12 Angry Men. Okay.
12 Angry Men. Okay. And this is a fictional book. It's a fictional story about one juror in a room full of jurors that changes the mind of every juror one at a time. I read that book and I was like, this could really happen. I understand it's fiction, the characters are fake, but I could see this actually happening in a courtroom. Like, so for me to read for me to read that stuff, I have to be able to translate it into real world experience, because if I can't translate it, it doesn't work. Like,
well,
what was the Steinbeck now for To Kill a Mockingbird, same thing.
Mockingbird. Yeah, Harper Lee.
To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my all-time favorite books when it comes to fiction stuff. Why? Because I could see that happening. It might have been a fictitious book, but when it was at the time it was written, and I also, by the way, at the same time, I was doing a report. I had to build a report on Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas.
Okay.
At that time frame. So again, that book was like, oh my God, I could just use the book for the translation of this thing I have to do on an actual court case. Like it was like so
you found the utility in it.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Even in the fiction, I found the utility of like being able to, it has to do something for me. And for me, it can't be getting lost. For me, it has to be, and now again, I've got
something for you. I've got a Northrop Frye for you, because actually, weirdly enough, he agrees with you.
See, I love that guy. I don't even know. I don't remember. What did you say?
He's Canadian. Northrop Frye. Northrop Frye. Canadian. Canadian essayist. We're going to move on to him because apparently to Quincey, we're going to bump him. No, Herman Northrop Frye. He was born in 1912, July 1912, and died in January of 1991. So he lived throughout the majority, actually all of the 20th century.
Wait. Before we get into this, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
The name of your podcast is Leadership Lessons in the Great Books.
From the great books, yes.
You're taking utility out of the great books.
I am. I did not say that. I did not say that I was above it.
I just wanted to make sure we were clear on here for the audience.
I did not claim moral high ground here. I haven't said anything at all.
It felt that way. It felt like you were implying moral high ground.
I think that we all have to own our own feelings. We all have to be big boys and girls and compartmentalize. No, I agree with it. No, I agree with you. It's. I think we have an age where I think we've gone too far into utility. I would say that. I think we've probably pushed, and I think the internet, as we've mentioned again today, like with language, I think the internet has driven a lot of this, because that's what it does. It drives. I mean, we're just talking about marketing tech versus marketing creative, before we started this episode, right? And where has creative gone? Right in the toilet, because creative doesn't serve any utilitarian, or sorry, not utilitarian. It doesn't serve any useful purpose if you're creating a pharmaceutical ad.
Right.
It really doesn't. Like, that's why you have a Cialis commercial with two people in two tubs holding hands, and then they just run the contraindicators and tell you that it's going to give you a heart attack, and now go back to your show.
Yeah.
That's why. And so when you overemphasize usefulness, you de-emphasize beauty. And I think De Quincey was searching for truth in beauty, which is something that artists have been looking for years, and searching for beauty and truth. And I think that that is a worthwhile pursuit that maybe some of us in the West have forgotten. Even look at the style of our buildings. I mean, even the physical spaces that we're in, they're not beautiful anymore. They're brutalist, and they serve a purpose and then they're done.
Yeah.
And that's a real, and I'm not the first person to say this, that's a real problem. It shows a real cultural poverty. Because yeah, I mean, we can exchange dollars and more people are wealthier than ever have been in the history of the world. And yet, you know, you have brutalist concrete architecture and you can't get something nice.
Well, one of my other sons talks about it from an it's industrial looking versus creative, right? So, right. However, I will tell you, if anybody watching this podcast or listening to this or watching this has an opportunity to Google the new building that State Street Bank just built in Boston, in downtown Boston, the financial district. Okay. The building's beautiful. They did actually a nice job doing the exact opposite. They were looking for that sleekness, that modern look, that stylistic look versus institutional and, you know, and that kind of, they wanted the building to be creative. And I thought they actually did an all right job. So,
well, I know, I mean, you know, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but you know, I have a background as an art major. I was in art. I was in the visual arts, you know, painting, printmaking, all of that, drawing. And so I'm also an intellectual guy who likes the utility part too. I like usefulness just as much as anybody else. But I would like it to be at least attractive. I would like an object to sit on my desk that has usefulness and is beautiful. And I think that there is a place for that. Now, if we're at the end of, and you can't really talk about beauty and usefulness without talking about being at the end of mass consumer culture. And so we're at the end of mass consumer culture, and we have been at the end of it for the last 30 years. It's just the backwash of it because we produce so much, it's still just flowing out to us. But mass consumer culture doesn't allow for, it only allows for industrialization, to your son's point. It doesn't allow for beauty. And De Quincey was writing during a time when industrialization hadn't quite yet begun, but it was starting, and it was the attitude that was shifting towards that.
I was just about to say that. It was right at the beginning of it.
Right at the beginning
right at the beginning of all of it. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So Northrop Frye, we're going to read The Keys to Dreamland from chapter 4 of The Educated Imagination, published in 1964. As I said, Frye was born in July of 1912, and he died in January of 1991. He was a Canadian literary critic and literary theorist, considered one of the more influential folks of the 20th century. Influenced, I already mentioned this guy on the podcast already this episode, but I'll mention him again. Jordan Peterson talks about Northrop Frye all of the time, as well as other, Lex Friedman, as well as other folks you may have heard of. So he begins with an idea or a thought process. And I'm not going to read the entire chapter because it's way too long, but he makes a point here that I think is going to be something that's going to resonate with Tom and resonate with leaders who are listening to us. So let's start off with the premise. Suppose you're walking down the street of a North American city. All around you is a highly artificial society, but you don't think of it as artificial. You're so accustomed to it that you think of it as natural. But suppose your imagination plays a little trick on you, kind of, that it often does play, and you suddenly feel like a complete outsider, someone who's just blown in from Mars on a flying saucer. Instantly, you see how conventionalized everything is. The clothes, the shop windows, the movement of the cars in traffic, the cropped hair and the shaved faces of the men, the red lips and blue eyelids of that woman that women put on because they want to conventionalize their faces or look nice, as they say, which means the same thing. To be outside the convention makes a person look queer, or if he's driving a car, a menace to life and limb. The only exceptions are people who have decided to conform to different conventions, like nuns or beatniks. There's clearly a strong force making toward conformity in society, so strong it seems to have something to do with the stability of society itself. So he opens up with this idea about conformity, right, and convention. When we move to literature, back to Northrop Frye, when we move on to literature, we again find conventions, but this time we notice that they are conventions because we're not so used to them. These conventions seem to have something to do with making literature, and this is to Tom's point, as unlike life as possible. Chaucer represents people as making up stories in 10-syllable couplets. Shakespeare uses dramatic conventions, which means, for instance, that Iago has to smash Othello's marriage and dreams of future happiness, and get him ready to murder his wife in a few minutes. Milton, speaking of Milton again, Milton has two nudes in a garden haranguing each other in set speeches, beginning with such lines as daughter of God and man, immortal Eve, Eve being Adam's daughter because she's just been extracted from his rib case. Almost every story we read demands that we accept as fact something that we know to be nonsense, that good people always win, especially in love, that murders are complicated and ingenious puzzles to be solved by logic, and so on. It isn't only popular literature that demands this. More highbrow stories are apt to be more ironic, but irony has its conventions too. If we go further back into literature, we run into such conventions as the king's rash promise, the enraged cuckold, the cruel mistress of love poetry. Never anything that we or any other time would recognize, and again, this is to Tom's point, would recognize as the normal behavior of adult people, only the maddening ethics of fairyland.
I don't even think I have to say anything here.
This one's for Tom.
Yes. I get it.
Now, he takes this premise. So this is his premise, right? That the maddening ethics of fairyland is what literature is all about. And he says, even the details of literature are equally perverse. Literature is a world where phoenixes and unicorns are quite as important as horses and dogs. And in literature, some of the horses talk, like the ones in Gulliver's Travels. And then he talks about The Swan of the Avon by Ben Jonson, and Shakespeare, and singing, and swans, how swans can't sing, and birds, and da-da-da. He's like, this is all ridiculous. And then he ends this when he goes on about Shakespeare for a paragraph, and he ends by saying, Shakespeare didn't burst into song before his death. He wrote 2 plays a year until he made enough money to retire, and spent the last 5 years of his life counting his take. So however useful literature may be in improving one's imagination or vocabulary, it would be the wildest kind of pedantry to use it directly as a guide to life. Now, I got to admit, I read this and I thought, as I was with him all the way up to that, and then he said that, and I went, well, I might as well just burn the whole podcast down.
I mean,
yes, no, it's fine. You can say it out loud. It's okay, because he pushes the argument, and then he takes a weird turn, which I'm not going to get to today, but he takes a weird turn in the middle of it where he basically undercuts his entire argument that he just set up to make a defense of literature. And I thought, because at first I was like, this guy. Oh, who is this guy? Who is this Northrop Frye who is speaking to me as if I needed his opinion?
And Canadian, nonetheless.
And a Canadian. What's going on in my attic up there? But I stuck with it, and I read through it, and I because that's what you do. You stick with hard things. You read them. You read people who disagree with you. And he does make several excellent points. And a good one is this one, back to the essay. Life and literature then are both conventionalized, which is actually true. And of the conventions of literature, about all we can say is that they don't much resemble the conditions of life. It's when 2 sets of conventions collide that we realize how different they are. Then he goes into H.G. Wells. He talks a little bit about Dickens. What we never see except in a book is often what we go to books to find. And I think that that's very, very important, an important point that he makes. And he says, if we're writing to convey information or for any practical reason, going to cookbook here for just a moment, our writing is an act of will and intention. We mean what we say, and the words we use represent that meaning directly. It's different in literature, not because the poet doesn't mean what he says too, but because his real effort is one of putting words together. What's important is not what he may have meant to say, but what the words themselves say when they get fitted together. I think that's an important distinction for leaders. That's something that we can take from Frye and apply it to, and this is where this now dovetails with what Orwell was talking about in Politics and Language, we can dovetail this with avoiding jargon in your memos. How many memos that just get released on the regular don't mean what they say?
Or you can't tell what they mean. You know, again, to the point where like you use an awful lot of words to say very little like to have very little meaning, like behind
Right.
it.
At all. Yeah.
Or
He says, well, and you know, the writer Joan Didion, she wrote in Slouching Towards Bethlehem about herself that that she's always selling somebody out. And that's what people forget. A writer is always selling somebody out. And Northrop Frye makes that point here when he talks about D.H. Lawrence. With a novelist, it's rather the incidents in the story he tells that gets fitted together. As D.H. Lawrence says, don't trust the novelist, trust his story. That's why so much of a writer's best writing is or seems to be involuntary. It's involuntary because the forms of literature itself are taking control of it. And these forms are what are embodied in the conventions of literature. Conventions we see have the same role in literature they have in life. They impose certain patterns of order and stability on the writer. Only if there's such different conventions, it seems clear that the order of words or the structure of literature is different from the social order. The question here for leadership is this: what are the conventions of leadership, and can you break them? Like, we're breaking the conventions of leadership just by doing this podcast, because who the hell puts literature and leadership together? That's breaking a convention. That's where real creativity is. I see a lack of creativity in leadership because so many leaders are just doing conventional things. So what are some of the conventions of leadership?
So that's a good question. I mean, are you talking about like the so are you talking about like the directives and like being able to, you know, you're going to write policy and everything's going to be written in an employee handbook, and all of your decision making processes are going to be
That's the first one. Yeah. I mean, that's a big one for sure. But then there's other conventions, such as we were talking about the clothes that people wear, right? That's a convention that's now gotten broken, right? Sure. Or here's another convention that got broken during COVID, the convention of getting in your car and driving 2 hours across Boston to go to an office. That's a convention. Yeah. Many of the conventions of work are being broken, and the conventions of interactions with people are being broken. But leaders are still saying many of the same things based on conventions that no longer work.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. Like, I'll give you an example of like an interaction I had with a salesperson that worked for me at one point. And this might kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming, like, or what my train of thought was. So in sales, we always have these quotas, right? We always have numbers we have to hit. And
by the way, that's a convention. Having a number you have to hit, that's a convention. That's something that everybody agrees upon, and this is the way we do things.
Right. And that's a convention that might not ever be, well, no. I think that convention, because there's a couple of companies that I can think of that have broken, you still have a number, but the way they view the number is very different than what our typical sales number is, which is basically driven by revenue and either month over month or year over year, whatever that case may be. But anyway, the interaction I had with them was about quota. And I said, I don't care how you get there. I don't care how long it takes you. I don't care if you work 5 hours a day or 20 hours a day. I want you to hit your quota. And he sarcastically said, so if I can hit my quota in 2 hours a day, you're not going to make me work the other 6? And I went, what did I just say? I said, all I care about is your quota. You hit that quota. I don't care how many hours a day you work. I don't. So he tested it on me. So he was right. He was actually slightly over quota. He was probably about 102, 103, 103% of quota, right? So he was well within his right to take the rest of the day off. And he came to me and he said, hey, I'm at 103%. I'm going to take the rest of the month off, which was, by the way, like a day and a half. Yeah. Like, which I said to him, okay. And he went, wait, you were serious about that? I said, hey, I told you all I care about is your quota. Now, you can choose to take the next day and a half, 2 days off, or you can choose to spend and invest the next 2 days in hitting your quota for next month. but that's entirely up to you because I gave you my word that if you hit your quota, I don't care what you do with your time. And he took the rest of that day off, but came in the next day.
Became
And
the next day.
he spent the next day getting ready for the next month. But he tested me on it, and he saw that I went through with it. Like I was not lying. When I said to him, I go, oh, and by the way, next month, if you hit your quota in the middle of the month and you want to take the next week off, go right ahead. I'm not going to give you grief over it because the conventional wisdom says that the quota is just there to make you do your job. You don't get to take the time off. You don't get to do that. So I broke the convention by saying, work 2 hours a day, work 4 hours a day. I don't care. Just hit the quota and you're good. And they tested me on it, and they saw the success of that test.
Well, one of the stupidest things about conventional wisdom is that it's conventional.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, it is, right? And creativity lives in the breaking of convention, which is what Northrop Frye is getting to in his essay. He's talking about how literature allows the breaking of conventions without the breaking of social order. That's the higher thing that he's aiming at. And it is fundamentally a defense. This is why I said at first I was like, oh, give me a break. But I framed it before as he undercuts his argument. He doesn't undercut it. He gets to where he's going, but he goes via the minority, which I should appreciate actually, because this is sometimes how I do it. He goes via the minority report versus the majority report, right? He's going at it from the weak side. If you were playing rugby, it's a weak side score versus a strong side score. Okay. And for those of you who've never played rugby, it's fine. I know what I'm talking about. Point is, he's addressing the idea that literature is important for social order. I think also literature is important for leaders. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. But it's important for leaders to be able to understand what the social conventions are, and then to be able to see how to break them. And some of the social conventions in leadership include, I think, well, it's beyond just clothes and norms and culture, but it's going to certain conferences, right? It's attending, or even the act of attending a conference. Just that act right there is a convention. Like my title says blah, 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 blah. My title says Senior VP of Sales, so I'm going to go to a sales conference. Why? Are you actually going to get something out of it? Or are you just going to have a vacation and fill yourself with 20-year-old scotch?
Single malt.
Right. Always. So
I mean,
by the way,
and I expect to learn something when I go. So
right. Well, you're going there not to break the convention. You're going there to support the convention, but also to gain something from it. But you're going there with precision of understanding and action, which is what Orwell would talk about, which I think fundamentally, to tie it also back into De Quincey a little bit, I think that gives you power. I think that moves it beyond utility and moves it into creativeness. I think you're a deeply creative guy, Tom, just not in the conventional kind of way.
Oh God. That was a reach. Are you like that was like
that's my Minority Report. It's the Minority Report.
Fantastic Four stretch reach. Like
it's the Minority Report. It's what I do. It's what I do.
I get it.
No, but I think for leaders, okay, so how can leaders stay on the path? I mean, we read Orwell, we read De Quincey, we read a little bit of Northrop Frye. How can leaders use any of this to stay on the path? What's our final word today as we round the horn here?
I think one thing that we always that we're always told, right? But I don't think we ever really understand the impact of it, is that literature in general gives us roundedness, right? Like when you read literature and you whether you agree with them or disagree with them, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or whether like you're reading somebody else's words from a particular time period that is not yours, right? Or I mean, maybe you are reading modern or contemporary literature as well, but all of us grew up reading the classics. And I mean, if you went to high school in America, you read half the books we've talked about, in these sessions. So I think part of it is that it goes beyond just like, what am I looking at right in front of me? And what if I'm looking at something right in front of me, how do I pull from knowledge of other areas of my life in order to make a decision based on what's in front of me, right? Like that well-roundedness of being a person helps leaders essentially stay close to it versus giving yourself the distance or trying to distance yourself. Like the show Undercover Boss comes to mind, right? If you've never seen the show Undercover Boss, it's these big companies, you know, in the United States, the trash removal company Waste Management was one of the first ones on the show. And it's this giant company that is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And the CEO went to work on a trash truck one day and nobody knew who he was, so that he could get back in touch with the common employee, with the entry-level employee. I think if we look at, and not just literature, but music can do this, right? Like if you listen to music from the 50s and 60s and just the vibe and the feeling is so different. If you can understand where that music is coming from, then you can understand that generation of people. It helps you understand working with them, right? I think all of it in general, not just classic literature, I think anything that makes you a well-rounded person makes you a better leader. So I think that's really where one of the reasons I love being on this podcast is because I seem to always find something, or you drag something out of me that I wasn't thinking of, and I realize that, like, I don't think and my family will tell you this, if somebody were to ask me like what kind of leader I am, what kind of person I am, whatever, half the time I don't know how to answer them, right? But I think what I've heard from in the past is like being well-rounded in what your conversation topics can make you a good X, fill in the blank. Like, it doesn't matter, not just leadership, but it also can make you a good subordinate, to be honest. Like if you, and again, I heard something very young in life, which was be nice to them on the way up because you're going to see them again on your way down, right? So when you are that person that is in your late 50s and you're not looking to climb the corporate ladder anymore, you just want to go do your job and go home, it gives you, being a well-rounded person also allows you to be a good employee, because you're now understanding where these people are coming from and why they're coming at you with things and why they're asking you to do things that are outside your scope of bit work or whatever that is. So I think all of the things all of the classic arts, I think going to the Museum of Fine Arts and looking at Picasso's and looking at those types of things, going to theater and going to operas and going and reading classic literature, I think all of that, if you can consume pieces of that along your lifetime, it's going to make you a better person. It's going to make you a better leader. It's going to make you a better husband, better son, better father, because you're going to stop looking at things through isolated lenses, and you're going to start looking at things through very broad spectrum lenses and be able to take bits and pieces of your life to make your decision and take your course of action versus just a simplistic view of it. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
absolutely. That is a robust defense of the humanities, which is something that has long been in decline in our culture and long been devalued in our culture. Not starting about 5 minutes ago. I mean, we've been devaluing the humanities for at least 50 years in the United States. And we see that in higher education, and we see that in the universities and in the college systems. And what has happened is the value of the humanities, and the humanities includes the arts. It includes philosophy, it includes theology, some of the things that even politics, and literature, the things that we talk about on this podcast, and the writers that we talk about here. Particularly as we go into an election year, those writers and those topics in those spaces make you, as a listener and as a reader, a better leader. Yeah. And a defense of the humanities is something that has to be remounted every generation, because every generation, particularly every generation in the West, but we're seeing now this increasingly happen globally, as they become more industrialized and as they go into a post-industrial posture, moves closer and closer to utility. And utility is necessary. Don't get me wrong. I don't need a shovel to be beautiful. But wouldn't it be cool if it had a really nice handle?
I gotta tell you, so what's funny that you said, like, I was sitting here thinking as you're talking, like, some of the most impactful experiences in my life, right? Like,
Mhm.
I remember the first time I saw Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera on
Mhm.
Broadway. Like the first time I saw that, I was like, "Oh my good lord, how it's awesome! Like it's just awesome, right?" First time I first time I heard the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and now mind you, I got to this is a better story. This is a better story. I was an inner city kid, and I grew up all the bad things you think of with inner city kids. I hate to admit, but most of them, just think of those when you think of what I'm telling you.
Okay.
I was a young or like preteenish. I think I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I got an opportunity to meet Cigi Ozawi.
Ooh.
And almost
For those who don't know, because I know, but for those who don't know who are listening, who is Seiji Ozawi?
So Cigi Ozawi was the conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and
There you go.
probably one of the best that ever touched the conductor wand, by a lot of people's opinions. Not mine, because he's the only conductor I know. So I'm not going to suggest that I know a lot about symphonies and orchestras and all that. But if you ask around that world, he was awesome, like just awe-inspiring and awesome, from what I gathered. And when I got a chance to meet him as a kid, and I was like, this man was godlike. He was amazing to talk to. And he opened up a part of my brain that I did not know existed, because I thought classical music was just noise. I mean, think about it. An inner city kid that grew up listening to Beastie Boys and Run DMC.
Yeah,
Like,
well, yeah.
I mean, Run DMC and those types of that type of music was like, that's all I cared about. Like that was music to me. Anything else was noise to me. And
Mhm.
when he started talking to the group of us, there was a group of us, and he started talking to the group of us about where the instruments came from, why they were used, what instruments influenced Run DMC. By the way, he knew that, and I was like, wait, what? Like, this guy knew more about music in the 20 minutes I talked to him than any single human being I've met since.
Mhm.
Like, nobody, and maybe Keith Lockhart, but whatever. Well, whatever. But like, amazing. It made absolutely amazed me, and completely flipped my mind on what classical music should be in somebody's world. I've since been to the BSO quite a few times. So the Boston Symphony Orchestra also has a side shoot called the Boston Pops, which
Mhm.
I've also seen a handful of times. Just amazing.
Yeah.
I grew up thinking classical music was just noise, right? So, it's just an interaction with one person, and it just changed my opinion of it forever.
And that is the point fundamentally of this podcast. You know, that's the point of conversations like the kind that we had today, and the point of us bringing essays and ideas and insights fundamentally. Because if you could take one thing from this episode as a leader, whether it's one thing about language, whether it's one thing about convention, whether it's one thing about the nature of utility and where we get our power from in literature. You could take one thing from this episode today and apply it to your real lived leadership life. I guarantee you, and I don't often make guarantees. Matter of fact, I almost never make guarantees, but I'd be willing to be able to guarantee on this. I guarantee you that, to Tom's point, you will have a more enriched and a more valuable life, and that will make you a better and a more valuable leader to the people that you are leading. So with that, I'd like to thank Tom Libby for coming on the podcast today, as usual. Always a pleasure.
Always my pleasure.
And with that, well, we're out. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. If you're listening to this on any of the major podcast players like iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and write a little bit in there. A couple of sentences is good enough. That actually helps us game those algorithms that I was just maybe addressing. And, of course, it helps us grow the show. Tell all your family, tell all your friends, and tell the leaders in your life that you know that need to be listening to this show that this show exists. By the way, if you want to get started on the leadership path yourself, or you know some people who need to go on the leadership path, HSCT Publishing, the home company of Leadership Toolbox and Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, can help you and your team do that. So check out our training webinars, coaching services, and more at leadershiptoolbox.us. We are remote, we're live, we're in person, we're on video, and we've got leadership development solutions for your civic group, nonprofit staff, public sector staff, or even your private sector leaders. And of course, you're going to want to check out our video-based subscription service at leadingkeys.com. That's leadingkeys.com for leadership development on demand. You don't like videos, you don't like training, but you really like the podcast? Well, I would also recommend reading a book. Matter of fact, I'd recommend reading my most recent book, 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership. You can get that in paperback, hardcover, or as an ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Ingram Spark, and any other place that you order books online. Finally, of course, we're on YouTube just like everybody else is. We'd love to have you help us grow the YouTube channel, so like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the HSCT Publishing channel on YouTube. Just search for HSCT Publishing, or you can search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button. Subscribing helps us grow the show. As it does with the audio, just is the same with the video. All right, that's it for me.